David Taub here with Eleni Kounalakis. She is running for Lieutenant Governor. She's in Fresno today. We're at the Denny's in downtown Fresno. Eleni, thank you for joining us. So one of the things I noticed, you're meeting today with some supporters, some people curious. And tell us a little bit about yourself. You used to be the ambassador to Hungary. You're endorsed by Kamala Harris. Tell us a little bit more about people who may not be familiar with you.
Well, thank you so much, David. Thanks for coming down to Denny's this morning. It was great to meet with some of the local activists and Democrats and community leaders, and of course your assemblyman was here this morning. My name is Eleni Kounalakis. I'm born and raised in Sacramento, so very familiar with the Valley. I grew up on a ranch farm outside of Sacramento. My father was an immigrant. He started out in this country as a farm worker. So if I'm elected, not only will I be the first woman ever elected lieutenant governor, I will also be the first daughter of a California farm worker elected statewide in California. But I'm very interested in coming out here to Fresno, talking to people, talking to community leaders, activists, business people, to get a sense of what's important out here to the people, not just of the city of Fresno, but also in Fresno County.
And what were you hearing today? What were some of the concerns that you heard today of issues that affect Fresno and Fresno County?
Jobs. I heard that jobs and education and job training is a real issue. I also heard that poverty in rural parts of Fresno County are also a big problem.
And so what would you do as Lieutenant Governor to help fix that?
Well, the Lieutenant Governor's job, honestly, sometimes gets disparaged, but the fact is it is designed to work on issues of economic development. I'm a businesswoman. I spent 18 years in business in the housing industry. I understand how to promote good programs that can help bring jobs, and so that's really what I'm going to be focused on if I'm elected.
It's interesting that you have a career as a developer, and there's a major problem with housing supply in Fresno, and I'm wondering why is that? Why do home builders have such a tough time whether it's the Bay Area, Southern California, here in the Valley, of being able to build homes?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize the California population is growing. Not all states have that issue, but when the population is growing, you need to be able to supply adequate housing along the way. And it's challenging because development is something that is very much of interest to the whole community. Neighbors want to have a seat at the table. Government, of course, has a seat at the table. The private sector has a seat at the table. The environmental community has the seat at the table. And so it's a challenging process to be able to bring people together and ask those important questions: where to grow, how to grow, what it should look like. So it takes time. But I really believe that when people roll up their sleeves and get to work, we can do what's necessary to grow in a way that communities feel comfortable with.
Do you think the state's environmental policies are inhibiting developers from building, whether it's permit challenges or whether it's just the economic challenges of overcoming these economic or the environmental concerns?
Look, I do think that in some areas the permitting process can be improved to be more streamlined, but it really takes communities recognizing that they want additional affordable housing. And when communities stand up and say, look, we'd like to see quality affordable housing, I think you're more likely to see a process that will be able to facilitate delivery of units. But again, it's a community process. Neighbors want to have a seat at the table, not just to say, okay, we know we need more units, but also to be able to have a voice in where those units go and what they look like.
All right. A lot of talk has been kind of died down a little bit about the Cal exit. Is that anything that you would ever consider, support?
No, look, I believe in unity. I believe in one California. But I also recognize that there are some very different challenges depending on where you are in the state. I'm visiting all 58 counties of California before the election. I've been on a road trip all summer. I'm going to be on a road trip. It's going to continue. I've been all the way up to Mount Shasta and Modoc County, down the east side of the state, through Mono County and Inyo County and Alpine, and now I'm making my way up the valley. And what I'm hearing is that parts of California have come roaring back after the 2008 economic downturn, and other parts of the state are still struggling to come back. As Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to be very focused on not just the parts of the state that are doing well, but the parts of the state that are still working to come back in terms of economic development.
Now, you've called President Trump the biggest bully of them all. Do you think it's the role of the California elected leaders to fight the Trump administration or to try to work with him?
Look, I certainly think that we need to always be looking to work with the federal government. I am concerned over the Trump administration's approach to health care. There is nothing that people in this state care more about than having access to affordable health care for themselves and their family, and for that health care to be affordable and accessible.
Do you think it's affordable now under the Affordable Care Act?
I think that the Affordable Care Act certainly has some challenges. Costs are part of it, but throwing out the baby with the bathwater is not the right approach. We're looking at the possibility of people on Medi-Cal losing coverage. So it's up to us in the state of California to look at this challenge and to ask ourselves, how can we do this better?
By calling Donald Trump in your campaign literature the biggest bully of them all, do you think that helps the political discourse, or do you think that creates more of the divide that we see between the left and the right?
Look, I'm a diplomat. I served as a United States ambassador. I am a diplomat. I have my concerns about the approach of the federal government to California, and we need to stand up to ensure that we protect our state and protect our values here in this state. But certainly, I am the kind of person who works together with people to find good solutions, and that's what I'll do if I'm elected.
The man you're trying to replace, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, is a big advocate for recreational marijuana, for Prop 64. Where do you stand on that?
Well, thank you for asking. I have two teenage sons. They're 15 and 16, and what's most important to me is that our kids are safe and that the regulatory environment surrounding cannabis is adequate. I think there's still a lot we don't know. I'm a mother, I'm a mom. I look at all California's kids and I have concerns, but the people have voted, and now the process to implement it is something that we're all going to have to be involved with. But first and foremost to me is to ensure that our kids are protected from being exposed to things too early.
Would you want a recreational marijuana shop in your neighborhood?
Oh, I never really thought about it. Look, I live in San Francisco. It's everywhere. I mean, when I was growing up in California, it was everywhere. You know, it's here. I think the question is, now that it's legal, how do we create a regulatory environment, first and foremost to protect our kids, and secondly, to ensure that abuse of the drug, like abuse of any drug, is something that as a society we can really try to limit.
And finally, you can't be in Fresno County without talking about water. Yeah. Where do you stand on the building of Temperance Flat Dam?
So that's one of the things that we talked about this morning. I have a lot more to learn and understand about it, but certainly as the people of California need clean drinking water. We need adequate drinking water. I know there are areas around here, rural areas, that are having some very significant problems in terms of access to water. And of course, you know, I chair the California Advisory Council for Trade, and our agriculture industry is a driver of the state economy, and we certainly need to ensure that there's adequate water to grow our crops, to feed our people, but also to drive the California economy.
Would you be willing to advocate to the California Water Commission to help build this project?
I met with your assemblyman here this morning. It was great to hear from him. I'm only here today in Fresno. I plan to come back, and I plan to do some more research to understand this project. But as I said, people of Fresno need access to water, and our farmers also need to ensure that they have access to water to be able to grow the crops that feed our people and drive our engine of our economy.
Why do you think this water issue has been such a divisive issue, not just among the Democratic Party itself? H.R. 23, which was discussed in Congress last week, the local Democratic Congressman Jim Costa was in favor of it. The other Democrats in the state, especially from the northern parts, were strongly against. Why is this such a divisive issue?
Well, it has major implications. There's limited funds to go around under the bond. There are many projects that people are advocating for. But as I said, I'm a diplomat. I think you need to look at these projects one at a time. We need to figure out what our priorities should be. But if we're all in agreement that what we're looking for is to ensure that we can steward our resources in a way that is sustainable over time, but at the same time meet the needs that we have for our farmers and for our families, I think that we'll be able to find good solutions.
Right, Eleni Kounalakis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.